Welcome,
Thank
welcome,
you.
welcome,
Thank
everybody.
you.
This is the CyphaDen Chat podcast in association with the Denku podcast. I'm your host, Tayamu Denku. I got my homie Pestilence with me, or Mighty Morphin Pesto Ranger. Changes his name every time on the screen. It's insane. I don't even get it. It's crazy. And tonight, special guest, normally Adeem, Adam and the Flood, right?
Yeah.
Echo Finch, front runner of the group Glue.
Yeah.
So many things.
So many things.
2-time Scribble Jam freestyle champion. There's all
Man.
these things. Like and AKA and this and that. Like, what's going on, man? How you doing?
I'm chilling, man. Thank you for having me. I appreciate it.
Of course, man.
That's a lot of things. That's a lot of AKAs.
It is. It is.
I
Before
do
we
find
jump,
I do find it ridiculous. Like I do. Like I definitely, it's difficult sometimes to get, like, that's a lot of history and like all those names and all those things, and I'm just like, man, I'm so jealous of like the people who have just been like the same, like you've been the same name like forever, for as long as I've known you. It's like, if people are trying to find you, it is not easy. I feel like I'm in like rapper witness protection or something. It's like keep changing my name.
What's the motivation behind so many name changes?
I mean, that's different lives, you know? Like it always just needed to feel right. And they've all been associated with vastly different things. Even though it's all been me, it's all, I mean, there's deeper stories, obviously, that would take a long time to probably to explain, but they're and I feel like they're all very natural progressions, of the things that I was doing or what I was trying to do. And I always felt like if there was a massive change in the sound, then there needed to be, something to represent that, and also, like, it just felt natural at the time. ADM was just, I mean, I don't know if we want to like go down this road first, but um I mean, do you want me to go down this road first, or you want to ask you something else?
Yeah. I mean, we could go down that road because I, like Pestilence asked, what's the motivation behind that? And the thing I was initially going to ask from the jump off is, how hard is it to brand different names? You know what I'm saying? I actually was asked recently to rebrand. I got down with Onyx, 100 Mad, and Fredro's initial conversation with me was, I think we should rebrand and start you fresh. And I was like, no. I've been doing music under the same name for like almost 30 years. I'm not starting fresh now. Although maybe I just don't get it. So I guess that is what I want to know. I want to know that.
He's also like, yo, and what are your feelings on screaming? He's like, are you down to scream very aggressively when you rap? That's like, when I think of Onyx, I'm sorry, when I think of Onyx, I think of like just me wearing pants that were like 20 sizes too big for me, just like listening to that first album, going buck wild. Like, that music is like riot music. There was like, I had no business being like that hopped up like on like hip hop then. That album is like, has achieved something that's really hard to achieve. Anyways, shout out to Onyx.
It's also one of the only live hip hop shows I've personally went to where they start a mosh pit every show.
Right. Yeah, I mean, that's incredible. Well, to get back to your question, for me, this has been something that's been on my mind, is that I wish I had the power to gather everybody who's ever dug whatever I've done and like get everybody together in one room and be like, let me just explain to you like what has been happening because there, it's been a long time. I've been doing stuff for a long time, and initially when I went by ADM, to which I mean my family even called me ADM. My mom used to call me ADM, and I had a bunch of really embarrassing, rap names. Well, I wouldn't say a bunch because I mean I've been ADM since I was like 15 years old. But I had like some that were basically me just like looking in the source and just being like, oh, that's a really cool name. How could I like make a name off of so and so? I will say that true story, so random. This is like when I was real young and I was looking for a rap name, and like my friends and I were like playing, like cards, or whatever, and I kept getting these aces, and and I was like, I'm gonna be Master Ace. That's gonna be my name for like but I had like no sense of like the Juice Crew. I was in like seventh grade. You know what I'm saying? Like I sixth grade, like I didn't even know. I like just wasn't hip. And then I was like, that's gonna be a dope name. And then of course, like 2 days later, I find about Juice Crew, and I'm like, damn, there is a Master Ace. But then so I mean ADM was always a thing, and for a while it was just ADM, just the letters, and everybody would always ask me like if like I interviewed somewhere or something, it's like, what does it stand for? What's the acronym? What does it mean? And I would always make up like something stupid, and whatever, until one day, my boy Shalem, who I've always, been around, like he wrote my name like a word, like Adeem. And then, I never really got into graffiti. I was always like the dude who like rolled with the people who could bomb. And then like I would, but I could like tag my name or something. So I started writing like Adeem. And then it just stuck because the thing about it just looked more like a word instead of three letters. You know what I mean? So like even then that was just like this little progression of like, okay. And I've always been into that kind of Easter egg sort of thing where it's like, if like I run into a lot of people who'd be like, what up, Adeem? Like that's like what most people, would think it was. And if I saw somebody who was like, what up, ADM? I was like, oh, all right, like you've been around, or like you knew, or you listened, or and not in like a poke and fun way. Or it just was always interesting to me. It was like a little experiment. So then, so ADM is what I was, for a long time. And then when I started Glue, like that was its own thing. That was the first time really that I'd been in this little world where, well, actually that's the second time. Have you ever heard of the rapper Adverse? You know who Adverse is? Talk about
Yes.
like elusive. So I was in a group with Adverse and Shalem called the Dorian Three. And it was like it was
Mm-hmm.
me and Adverse and Shalem. And that was really the first time I was like, all right, well, if it's me and Shalem and another person, then we need to have a group name. And so Dorian Three was like this little offshoot. And so and then right around that time was the whole story of Glue. And man, you know, I always joke that my headstone is gonna say like he had no short stories. Like I feel like my whole life is just like one gigantic story. Like there's so many details wrapped up in everything. But when Glue happened, that was the first time that something felt really, really different. And Shalem was about to go DJ for Sage Francis, and so he was going to be gone, on tour with Sage for a long time. And so I was looking for a backup, or like, all right, well, how do I still tour? Or how do I do what I do? And I ended up meeting DJ DQ, and I met Maker. I met Maker first, flying out to a show in Chicago. Like the whole Glue story could be its own podcast, but meeting them and putting that all together, that was really the first time that I was like, oh, all right, well, this is completely different. This is like I see this as my future. We just instantly meshed in a way that hadn't meshed with anybody before. And that was like, you know, we went through a couple different names, but I was still ADM and Glue because at the time I was the most known name, you know, out of those other two. DQ was in a group called the Animal Crackers, which all turntablists, and then Maker was part of this crew, Them Bad Apples, Aurora, Illinois. Huge shout out to Aurora, like my second home. So he was part of a whole other crew, and so that's just how that came about. But Glue was the thing that really stuck, and then cut to we went on we got asked to go on the Warp Tour in 2004, or I got asked to go on the Warp Tour, and it so like it was really before Glue had, but we had like we had done our first album, but still most people knew me by ADM, and the woman Jamie who was booking the stage, like she knew me as ADM, and I was like, well, I have this other project called Glue, and I kind of think that's the thing. And that really is what turned my focus completely towards Glue. So I was ADM within Glue, and that was really a part of it. But when Glue stopped, that really changed how I approached everything. You know, Glue went pretty crazy for a lot of years. I mean, we toured straight for, I don't know, about 5-6 years, which like in retrospect, like doesn't sound like that much. It's probably more 6 or 7, but it was like, you know, 200 shows a year. I mean, we went hard, and that was like all over the country. Like, so we were just in a van, you know, pretty much nonstop. But then when Glue stopped, and you can feel free to cut me off these like long-winded answers, but that's what I'm saying. Like, it's a massive history, you know, you're talking like 20 years of history. But just to come up to your actual point, to close that thread, was like when Glue stopped, all these things sort of started moving in motion, and I really felt like, all right, I was in New Hampshire, like I'm from New Hampshire, but I was living in Chicago, and then she wasn't even my wife yet, but like my girl at the time, who then became my wife. We were both from New Hampshire. We moved back to New Hampshire, so it's like all of that completely changed how I was approaching things. And then I had kids, and when I had kids, like I didn't want to tour ever again. Like I was like, yo, I just want to be here, and I want to just be a dad, and like, but like still make music. And then everything just stopped. Like I felt like my interaction with like a larger world stopped. And so once I got to that point, and I was like, well, I don't really know what is happening, because the people who are following Glue, I think, had a difficult time sort of stepping back to be like, all right, well, I'm just going to follow ADM for now, because I still had that name. And then the people who had followed ADM, some of them didn't even know that Glue exists. This is like all before social media. This is like all, you know, this is all before like phones, like in that way. So it was this weird transition to where I found myself in this place of like, I'm starting completely over. Like, and there was something exciting about that, to be like, all right, well, if I'm starting from scratch, and now pretty much every single thing that I do from here on out is purely artistic. Like, I'm not making an album to then go tour it for a year to then come back and make an album. Like, I was out of that cycle, and I was off the road. So that definitely informed every single decision I have made from there on. And so it's a different question for me, because like you never stopped, and I stopped one aspect of it, but everything I did became very inner. Like I've been putting out, I've never stopped putting out records, but the way that I approached it and the way that I have like interacted with other people after putting out that music is totally different.
Yeah. That made me think of that answer made me think of multiple things, because you touched on first off, you've touched on, you used to tour like 200 dates a year, which for an artist, I mean, I tour, but that to me um, how do how do you, how do you do? I mean, so I've gotten to a point where I'm older.
Yeah.
Obviously, we're older now,
I mean,
but
yeah,
but
we,
like,
homie,
but
we.
we're older now. But
Yeah, yeah,
it's like, if I don't do shows for a long period of time, like usually I don't do many shows in the wintertime. I use that to wrap up projects, albums, and shit like that.
yeah.
And then I'll jump back into the show stuff like spring until fall or whatever. But if I don't do shows for a long time, I've gotten to a point where um I'll lose my voice the first few shows. Like it'll be
Mm,
halfway through the set. You know what I'm
yeah,
saying? So like thinking of doing 200 shows in a year,
yeah.
I don't even know how to fathom that at all. Like how does that even happen without like being super fatigued and just, obviously there's fatigue, but like how do you stay doing it? Because you're also from the same era, and Pestilence and me preach it as well, where like showmanship is a thing. You know what I'm saying?
Absolutely,
So
absolutely.
so we're not out there doing what a lot of the new age has jumped into doing, where they have their whole backing track play and they're
Mm,
jumping around and just doing ad libs over the top of their whole track.
right.
We're showmen. Like the performance is a real thing. Like we've perfected it. We do it. That's what we do. So to do that 200 dates, I'm the mind is crazy right now.
Well, I think that there's a level of survival, you know, I've gotten to really uh process this. So I mean, I just turned 46, and it's like when you're really far away from it, you know, this is something like for real that I've like, you know, I've definitely like gotten a therapist about, like I've definitely like worked through, like I'm a grown-up person. I'm a father of like, you know, two kids. I'm a husband, like I'm a friend. Like I'm a mostly stable adult. And, you know, like I make money, like I've got to, you know, I work, like, and I still will treat my bank account. Like my wife constantly is like reminding me that like I don't have to, when we go on a long drive, I'll like barely sip my water, because like I knew, like I feel like if you're getting in the car and you're going, then like you don't want to drink all your water, because then you're gonna have to like go to the bathroom, and then you're not gonna get to the show in time if you're going too much. Like I'm still like in tour mode sometimes in my life, and I'm so far from that. But like there's some things that were like ingrained in me, being broke, man, like so broke. Maker and I talk about this all the time. It's like to live on the road and like you're just playing. I didn't think there was any other choice. Like because the truth is I've never, and I think this has always been like the biggest criticism of me. Like I've never thought that my recorded material was even half as good as my live show. So I thought that the only way that I could sustain a career and in that interaction with people was just to be live, like to be in people's faces, to give the best show I possibly could. So all those things was like there wasn't really a choice, and I think you settle into uh this level of fatigue where it's like never ending, like you're always tired, and so you don't feel more tired or less tired, like you're just always crazy tired. But being able to sustain at that level, it's like you sort of get numb, you know, a little bit to that. um and that's just something, and it's not for everybody, because looking back, I mean, it's pretty awful. Like you know, and that was before I did all of this stuff before I really had a sense of like myself as a person, a sense of like how to take care of myself, a sense how to eat properly, a sense of I've been a vegetarian for 20 years, and it wasn't until I toured with the Soliloquists of Sound, who have like, you know, gone on and they're all in different places, but like you know, that's my family. And
Yeah,
like,
shouts to them real quick.
oh
Shouts to them.
man, yeah, I mean, still the greatest live like hip hop act I've ever seen. And like they touring with them and going on the road for 50 shows with them, it was like, and they were all vegan at the time. They taught me how to eat on the road, you know, and before that, it's like 2 years of just like Subway and you know, like figuring out peanut butter sandwiches and like figuring out ways to exist. And um so it took me a long time before I realized that there was like a science to it, and there was a way to actually treat yourself better. But no matter what you're eating, no matter if you're not sleeping well, but you're pushing and pushing. And that also was the way I felt alive, you know. I needed that release of energy. I didn't have anything that was comparable to that, you know. And so that release was necessary for me, and I just kept it going for as long as possible. And then when I stopped, I mean, I in no way ever want to, you know, for real compare it to anybody who's ever like served or come back home from war or been in that situation. It's not that, but there is a level of like this PTSD in a way of like constant motion, constant movement, and like putting your body through something like that, man. It took me years to come down off of that.
Mm.
Yeah. It wrecked my back. Like, you know, like, I mean, because I would go hard every
Oh
single
yeah.
night,
Yeah.
hard, you know. I'm like, you know, talk about like Onyx, like in my head I was trying to be like that, you know, like I was trying to just jump into the crowd, go crazy, I'm screaming, I'm giving everything I have every single night. And I was just like, well, I'm just going to do it until I'm dead. Like eventually I'll just drop dead, you know, like I'll just keep pushing. And that never happened. But then when I stopped, it was like slamming on the brakes, you know. And my body was not interested in that.
Yeah.
Like,
Yeah.
you know, I was a wreck for a while.
Yeah. Cause I'll never forget, man. I think it was the Rhymesayers 10-year anniversary Scribble Jam.
Mm.
And I'm pretty sure you rocked that. And you were on like this fucking, you're on like this thing in the middle of the whole crowd, like on the ground. I
Oh
don't know.
yeah, I was on a picnic table. I was on a picnic table.
And like the whole crowd was around you,
Oh
and
yeah,
you were
yeah.
like this person in the middle. Like it was just I never forget it. Like I remember seeing the shit. Yeah, you definitely showman.
Man,
Like I
can I
said, showman.
wait? Because that's a funny thing. Just like a quick story about that. So there was always this moment where even right before we would play, I always would walk out into the crowd, even if there's 10 people there, and I'd always spend a moment, you know, just looking around, being like, where is it? Like, where is that thing where am I going to be? What am I going to do? What's that thing that's going to make this show special? And we were getting ready, like we had done sound check, and actually that year was the year we were on the Warp Tour, so it was like it was crazy. That we were out of our minds, and we're just about to play, and you know, Scribble Jam like put us in this like amazing spot. And they were the homies, you know, like so that was family too. And they were trying to give us, because you know we had like a thing happening on the Warp Tour, and they were trying to give us love. And I actually thought I was gonna have a corded mic, and like I'm for literally like 5 minutes before I'm about to go on, the sound guy runs over and hands me a wireless mic, and I was just like, oh, I'm wireless? And he's like, yeah, yeah, yeah. And it just hit me. And I look over at this bouncer, and it was at Annie's back in the day, which was, you know, this big outdoor place. And the Cincinnati is where Scribble Jam was. And those bouncers, man, they were diesel. Like all of them were huge. And I just went straight up to this one dude and I was like, hey, can we put this picnic table those are like industrial, like big picnic tables, you know? And I was like, can we put this picnic table in the middle of the crowd? And that guy was like, no. And I was like, yo, I can't really explain it right now, but I need you to put that picnic table in the middle. And I was like, urgent. I think he just like saw the fire in my eyes, and he's like, okay. So two guys just go over and they put it there. I didn't even tell my DJ. I didn't tell anybody, like, because it was super quick. And they were looking for me. And then they just said, they announced us, and they were like, the guy who was announcing, I could tell was super nervous because I wasn't on stage. And he's like, Glue, And then I just stood up on that picnic table and was just like, here I am. And it was, I'll never forget like how ill it was to, there was probably like 2,000 people there. I mean, it was like a lot of people.
Yeah, that was a popping
And
year.
and the whole, the whole crowd's looking at the stage, and literally at the same time, everybody just turns around and looks at me. And I was just like, wow, that was the first thing. Cause I was like, if I can get their attention, everybody looks at me, then all of a sudden, like the dynamic is completely shifted. And so that's the thing. That's why DQ is the greatest. Like he just put the beat on, you know what I'm saying? Like we just went right into it. But we'd been doing stuff like that on Warped Tour. It was brutal. I mean, we just had to figure out ways to get people to listen to us. Man, I did an insane amount of crazy, crazy things. And so anyway, so that was like, we just did it, and it just turned into this that's a highlight for me, man. That was a really incredible moment. But yeah, but those were always how I would try to handle it. It's like, what can I manipulate here to make it a different show?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. Pastor, you got anything built off the story that he was?
Well, I was actually curious kind of before too, when you were talking through kind of like a little bit of your history. You mentioned that you guys were touring together for 6, 7 years, and then you guys kind of stopped that and Glue ended.
Mm.
What was the end of Glue? What was that like?
Well, there was some, well, a big part of it was DQ, the DJ. He had been trying to go back to school. And of course, if you're doing that many shows, and like the bread and butter is like the spring and the fall, which are obviously like those are the school semesters. And so he was like, I can't do both. So originally the idea was, well, we're gonna take a little bit of time. There were a lot of factors. We went on a tour that didn't go very well, mainly because we lost our booking agent. Like our booking agent quit the company, that the booking agency we were with. The agent quit while we were on the tour, and it was like, and there was some uncertainty as to like where her artists were gonna go. A bunch of people were getting let go from the agency. There was a lot of uncertainty. Our label at the time, we were signed to Fat Beats, and that was also like a whole epic story of how they were looking to the future. They signed like 4 different acts. We were one of them. And then the 3 people who signed us all left Fat Beats at the same time. So we were just kind of out in the middle of this rap ocean, just like kind of floating, like, well, what are we doing? So it's a bunch of bad luck. DQ wanted to go back and to school. So we're like, all right, there's a lot going on. Let's just chill for a minute. And then also, we just had these creative differences, for something that was really seamless for us. When it came time to do our second album for Fat Beats, and we would have these. I was always really the leader of the group, more so like not creative leader, but more so like I would be the one who would do most of the interviews. Like if we were out somewhere, I would tour manage us. I would make sure I collected all the money, at the end of the night. I was the one who advanced shows. Like I always just took up that stuff. And so I mean we were completely 3 equal parts through the whole thing, but I ended up doing most of that stuff. So it was like when we would come together to do records, we would talk about, all right, what are we looking for? And a lot of times, like we would bring stuff like, I'm listening to this right now. I'm listening to this. What do you think? And I kind of scared them off a little bit because Maker was listening to like, that was his Dilla phase. I mean, a phase that never stopped, but like he was really into this sort of like soul sounding, like high pitched vocal, like sped up, like that Dill-esque production. DQ was really into this sort of like indie synth sort of vibe. And then I was like, yo, what if our next album was a story about a gravedigger who can hear the stories of the people he's burying? And it's like super blues, like roots music. And they were like, what? They're both like, nah. They're like, I don't know. And I'm like, I heard it so strong. I mean, it was so strong. And we tried to do like 3 or 4 songs, and one of them ended up being really the thing that pushed me to do this album called The Volume in the Ground. And like that was like a whole journey. But I mean, I heard that whole record and they didn't, you know, like and so it was like, all right, well, let's just take this little bit of time and figure out what's good. Maker at the time was also like at the same time he had this like parallel life with Quell. So him and Quell like kept making records and they toured. So it's like he didn't really have to. Blue stopped, but then he just kind of leaned into what he was doing with Quell. So he kept going. DQ stopped making music and like went to school and defeated college and like so he just went on to like have a family and he does incredible work now. So anyways, and so it all just very naturally happened. It was sad though, like I still have never had a stage show like I did with them. It was the easiest it's ever been. It's never been that easy again to make music with people. So that was hard too. It was like not only did we stop touring, but the identity and like this thing that I've been working so hard to try to build up. And because the other thing too, I've never really been I've had like loose associations with people, and as far as my peers, like coming up in that world, like everybody had a crew and I never feel like I really fit in that regard. I didn't want to be like a mini atmosphere. Like I felt like I was like my own thing. You know what I mean? Like I didn't want to be like
Yeah.
a mini Anticon. These are all references. Obviously, majority of people know atmospheres, but like Anticon, that these are sort of like all these camps. I didn't really know the Def Jux guys like that. I just was sort of in my own little world. And for whatever, even though I was super cool with everybody, I I didn't feel like I didn't really fit, and I don't feel like any of those people were like, "Yo, come join us." Like I just was sort of my own thing. I've always been that way, and so it felt extra, like I was in the middle of nowhere. You know what I mean? Like after Glue, because I felt like Glue was really, that really was the family.
Yeah, I mean, I can definitely. It's weird because I didn't get into hip hop until I was like 24, and I'm like
Mm,
30 now.
yeah.
And I got into it just like completely by accident. Ended up at a show because I had a friend pass away. Met up with Space Case, which is actually where I am right now, is his studio in
Mm,
Sturgeon Bay, Wisconsin. And
mm,
he had been running a crew called Two Face Media for, I don't know, maybe a decade prior to this. So he had already kind of had a fam and like an establishment of a
mm,
base, basically. It was more or less like he was kind of the hip hop side of that, but then once he took me under his wing, we just started doing a lot more stuff. Like he was kind of towards the tail end of what he was doing, but then we started doing more stuff and we just kind of naturally expanded to like, I mean, because I don't know how it is. I don't think New Hampshire would be that much different,
mm.
but I've never been there before. Like Wisconsin's an island, man. When it comes to like hip hop, there's not
Yeah.
like there's a lot of talented people that live in Wisconsin, but we're all pretty spread out from each other. So I think like for
Right.
us, it's out of necessity. It was like, man, if any of us are ever going to do anything, like kind of have to come together because these
Right.
other groups of people that are doing, stuff Denku referenced before, like these people rapping over vocals, doing pay to play events, doing all these things that are like, putting on bad shows that sully venue reputations, all these things that are hurting all of us in the
Mm,
entire scene in general. It kind of became like a motivation to like, man, we really got to work together with the ones that are strong and that do have the integrity and care about, because I think everybody cares about different things. When you get into music, like people have different passions and interests, obviously, in their regular lives. But from an artistic standpoint, it feels like there's really just kind of like these two camps. Really, at the end of the day, there's the people that do it because they love it and they're super passionate about it. And whether it was a hobby or a business or anything in between, they'd still be doing it because they love it.
mm,
Then there's other people that see art, viral success, things like that as a means to an end, and even if it's on a small scale, even if they don't see themselves being, worldwide renowned, just even having that little boost of being on a stage in front of people in your hometown. Some people just live off of that like mini clout and that's enough for them. And I think that kind of creates like a weird divide amongst people in, you know, like moving the ship of hip hop forward in terms of like, man, like there's a lot of times that hip hop has been pushed to the side, you know,
Mm,
alongside other genres in like the Grammys and in all these awards shows and in media in general. Where it's like, man, it kind of sucks that there's not more of a push of people to come together, especially like because I came into it so late, you know, most of my knowledge and research is like going back and finding these cliques and finding these camps and going down these rabbit holes and watching hours of footage of these things like Scribble Jam and all these other
yeah,
like battles and all that kind of stuff.
it's
And seeing
history
like,
now.
yeah, it's
Mm,
history now, or like the Bazooka Tooth documentaries with the Def Jokes guys and all
mm,
those people, and like just seeing these videos of these people when they're in the same situation, like we're in an attic in somebody's house, you know, it's like
right.
these people all were in that same situation at some point. And it does like it really does kind of hit home when you like you were in the mix of that. You were in the sea of all of these camps and all these tribes and all these people to kind of be floating on the outside of that. Like, man, that's tough. Like I definitely you know, I experienced it more like in high school and in other elements of my life where I didn't really fit in there.
Right.
Hip hop has been kind of the opposite of that for me. Like hip hop, it feels like I've just found a natural place with all these different great people groups. Like Denku, we put him on a show one time. I know Space had worked with him before a lot, but after we had that one show with him, I was like, man, we need to do more work with him because it was like seeing that live performance and seeing that like somebody that does something so different, so over the top, so like, man, this guy cares so much more about his live performance than I even thought I should like
Right.
invest.
Right.
And it
It's
inspires
different.
you to
It's
like,
different.
yeah, you're like, damn. And it made me really be like, okay, well, what's my thing? Where do I find my niche? Where do I find the parts of my show that I can continue to add and build elements into what I'm doing to connect with people while I'm up there and just provide an experience? Because like seeing that show for the first time, you know, it's like I've had a few of those experiences where you see somebody that's just really passionate and credible about what they do. I grew up in like rock music. So it was like I
Mm,
would see that all the time at like these festivals and seeing all these rock acts. So like then to see that in hip hop, like I'd never seen a performer that did that kind of stuff, you know, and you guys came from an era where there was all kinds of cats doing that kind of stuff in one, you know, like Scribble Jam, like in these big venues and in these big events and stuff like that. And it's like it's weird to see that like as like a token of the past. Like there's not as much of that kind of stuff going on where like all of hip hop comes together in one house and has friendly competition and talks. I mean, there's shows, there's events, there's stuff like that, but it feels like it's a far cry from that era.
Hmm.
I mean, it is. It's a different world. I mean, you know that's the thing that I feel like hip hop suffers from a lot of times is not recognizing that the world has changed. I mean, I can't. I have to understand my place in history, and in that, I mean, whatever that ends up totally being, because things are. I'm still making music, and my journey is different. But my story is still happening. You know what I mean? Like it hasn't ended at all. Um, but there is a I can't I can't put two people together and be like, well, this is the same. I'm trying to think of like a good sort of contemporary thing to like compare it to. Actually, this is going to be. I feel like time's so fast. This is super dated. But like I remember when people got so onto like Lil Yachty, like when he like the whole he got in that like whole fight with like Joe Budden or whatever. Joe Budden sort of like yelling at him about like not knowing his history or like what he's doing and um I feel like that's as close to like Real Housewives like drama that like I'll probably ever get to is like Joe Budden yelling at somebody. But like you can't expect a generation who literally has everything at their fingertips, like everything at their fingertips, to have the same response as my generation who, you know, the amount of effort that I had to put in to find a fact like about someone like who someone's publicist is, or like what record label, you know, what did their record label also put out, or like studying liner notes and the lengths that I went. And that's not like an old man like shaking my fist like these kids don't know. Like it's just totally different. And maybe that has to do with me being a parent too. Like they're apples and oranges to me. Like and so I can't expect that the level of showmanship would stay consistent with the level that it was, because things have just changed. And like that's the vibe. The vibe completely switched now to it's very like low key, everything got slow. And a lot of times it's like comparatively to the drugs that are like the most used, you know, everybody got super slow. Everybody started taking pills. Everybody like everything just got so like wavy. Whereas like that's not what it was like in the 90s. You know what I'm saying? So like but the idea of having to pay your dues, I think that was first and foremost on everybody's mind. It was like you got to pay your dues, and especially underground hip hop and indie hip hop came from that. Like indie hip hop itself in itself is fighting. Like there just to exist as indie hip hop means that you are going against a corporate entity, or like a corporate sort of structure, um a system. I would say that like you're going against a corporate system. So like inherently just being indie meant that you were rebelling against something, and that's energy. Like that's putting energy into something. So you couldn't be so like lackadaisical or whatever. It's because you had to do so much physical work. You had to, you know, and that doesn't exist in the same way as it used to. So like, but I'm not mad at anybody for that, because that's just the way that the world changed. I can be mad and annoyed at like, you know, laziness has always been laziness, but I can't necessarily expect them to keep it the same way that it was. Do you know what I'm saying?
Oh, absolutely.
Yeah.
I definitely understand what you're saying in a lot of regards. You know, like I work behind a bar. I've done that for over a decade now in Wisconsin, and that's like, that's church in Wisconsin. Like you
Right.
can go to a
Right.
bar.
Right.
I'm everyone's therapist. I'm everyone's like the
Right.
guy they come and tell all their bullshit to. So I get to be the keeper of all these stories.
Right.
Um, and see that. And I've gotten to work in different venues that like have had an appreciation for live music. And I'm blessed to come from like Sturgeon Bay is a small little town. It's the thumb of Wisconsin, and it's kind of a little musical hub, you know, not as much for hip hop,
Mm.
but just music in general. Like it has a huge appreciation for artists that give a fuck and like put on a great show. So like I grew up
That's
watching,
dope. Yeah,
yeah,
that's
I grew
dope.
up watching people that like worked their ass off. You know, my uncle's in a band and has been in a band since I was little. And like he's the music guy in town now. Like he's the sound guy that does all this shit and he still plays.
Mm.
But like I grew up, like you said, under that, like watching people work hard for stuff, watching people put effort in and getting to
Right.
see them kind of grow. And I think the thing that like, because it's weird to me to see, like I started the same time, like a lot of these other guys that are like out here now doing the things that I dislike and disagree with,
Mm.
are doing. I came out at the same time as them. And I feel
Mm.
like I'm 10 years in the past as far as like what I connect with, 20 years in the past sometimes, and what I connect with. And
Right.
I think it's just like, you know, what you grow up under and what influences you and what inspires you. And for me, like, I don't ever hate on anybody for doing things that way. I always try to come at it from a like, man, you don't know what you're missing out. You really don't know what you're
Right.
missing on.
Right.
It's like when
Right.
you put that effort in and you get that knowledge, like for me, like the thing that addicts me the most with the music is the constant, like, this is something that you get to see progress and evolve, and you can continue to add tools to, and you continue to fine tune things and improve different areas. There's so many different ways to flow. There's so many different ways to deliver bars. There's so many different ways to do all these different elements of hip hop, both live and in a studio. And it's like, man, this is like an endless, it's like a free world video game that has no memory limit. Like, it's an endless world that we can explore. And I feel like so many people just get stuck in a little hole of, you know,
I mean, that's
this is
Trendy.
art.
my ground. This
Yeah.
is my ground, you know, and it's
Yeah.
like,
Well, that's art in general. Like,
uh,
I mean, art in general. Yeah, people get stuck. They get stuck in these things. They're like, oh, I do this thing. This is what I'm good at, so I just do this, and they don't really pull themselves like in any new direction. And you know, that going back to, you know, the original question is like, you know, the branding or like all the AKAs or switching stuff. It's like I always felt like I liked that feeling of pulling myself to a new space, like a new place in my brain, in my mind where I could create something, and I've always seen it as like my own little like Marvel universe or whatever. You know what I mean? Like it always has felt like I am in control of this whole little universe. So building like new characters for myself is just a way for me to exist in my own little art world, you know?
Yeah, no, I think it's dope. And it honestly, it did fascinate me a lot talking about the sound changes. And when you mentioned like saying like the sound and like that changing so much inspired you to want to change the namesake as well. And
Mm,
like that was one part like for me, because like I definitely want to do different branding and stuff like that. But like the sound changes, I feel like I've done a lot of sound changes already in the music that I've created.
mm,
Um, and it's I think a lot of it has to do with like Denku. Like Denku's got like a he's got a huge catalog, which I think a lot of people know that, but I don't think a lot
yeah.
of people take the time to like dive into that and listen to all this stuff. And it was one of the things that like once I really started gaining a respect for him, you know, I slowly started going through these projects and just hearing all these different sounds, all these different voices that were the same person, you know, and it was like it's cool to see the other way of interpreting that as like because I like that element too of like basically starting a new save game. It's like
Yeah. Right.
I with the knowledge of before. It's like you've already played the game before, and now you're
Mm,
starting with a new character, you know, but with more knowledge, you know, from square one. And it's like that is fascinating to think about that, like because I think a lot of people probably go through the like, man, if I knew now, or if I knew then what I know now,
yeah.
holy shit, it'd be over for these motherfuckers. And it's like you kind of make that space for yourself by
That's
doing.
true.
I okay. So I want to take it before we dive into because you had sent me earlier some music
Yeah.
uh for a new project you're putting out. But before we dive into talking about that, which I want to, I don't know how much. I don't know if you're time restricted on how long you want to stay on the
Nah,
podcast,
man.
but
I'm chilling. I'm chilling.
okay. So because I wanted to get into um okay, college for me. I was in
Okay.
college early uh early 2000. I met this
Mm-hmm.
DJ from Chicago. And it's fucked up because I can't even remember his name.
Okay.
He lived down the hall from me. He was not like a known DJ. We were in the same dorm room or dorm thing,
Yeah.
not dorm room, but dormitory, like the whole
Yeah.
shit.
Yeah. Yeah.
Stayed down the hall. And this was around the time when Napster was a thing before you had to
Mm-hmm.
pay for it and all that shit.
Right.
And I remember he would come over and because I had like a brand new computer and he came over and he was like, man, you like hip hop and all that? And I was like, yeah, man, I've been rapping since fucking 12 years old or whatever. Like I like hip hop, but I wasn't deep dove into it like you had said. Like
Yeah.
I wasn't like I didn't know all these crazy things until I like researched it. Well, this dude put me onto a lot of indie shit,
Mm.
a lot of independent stuff, and he's actually the first person that introduced me to any Scribble Jam shit. And one
Mm.
of the first videos I saw was your 98 championship
Oh shit.
battle.
Yeah.
Um, and then I kind of knew who you were.
Mm.
And then I dove more into the Scribble Jam shit. And I was like, I need to go to this.
Yeah.
But '03 was my first year. But
Yep.
I saw all the videos. I saw the '01.
Yep.
You know what I'm saying? I saw all that shit. Um, so I need two things. I need one of your standout memories from Scribble Jam that stands out the most,
Okay.
whether it be a battle, whether it be something that happened.
Yeah.
And on top of that, I need your take on the lost art of freestyle, like off the top
Right.
freestyle. Not like, because now there's the new, not that it's new, obviously it's been there, but now there's the new controversy thing because Big Daddy Kane said it's a free verse.
Right. I
No
mean, right.
concept. But for
That's
me,
always been
but for
right.
me though, it's always been off the top.
Off the top. Yeah.
That's what's been like for me.
Yeah, no
So
doubt.
those two things I kind of want.
Okay. So a memory. There's a lot. There's lots and lots and lots and lots. I mean, I think that the first time, well, the thing that immediately comes to mind, and again, like I don't get anywhere. I've never had a straight line in my whole life. It's like the only reason I ended up going to Scribble Jam the first time is because I became me and my guy Shalem, we became cool with the Anticon guys, which was Soul, Mood Swing 9, Alias, DJ Mayonnaise. Those guys were all a part of the Portland main scene. And so there, like I said, there's a lot that goes into that of how we met. But anyways, we became close with those guys. And they had at the same time, they had gone out and done an album called Deep Puddle Dynamics, and that's because they did. I hope I'm not getting my history wrong, but I think they did a show in Nashville, and it happened to be the show that like a bunch of people were at. Dibbs was there, Mr. Dibbs, who's also like a very influential person for me in like my hip hop world, and one of the people responsible for Scribble Jam. So Dibbs was there and Soul was there, and Soul was super up on, he was such a pioneer of the internet and connecting with people. And I think Atmosphere was there too, but somehow and Dose One was there. And somehow these guys all met. They formed this group, Deep Puddle Dynamics. They go out and they do this record in Minneapolis, and that record becomes a classic. That record it changed. Talk about like also like being on the outside. Like when those guys went and recorded that, I was like, man, like this is where it's at. I'm like right on the outskirts of them, and was sort of like this. I was like a cousin of Deep Puddle Dynamics. You know what I mean? And so that ends up happening, and then I find out about Scribble Jam, and I'm up in Portland. Portland was about a 3-hour drive from where I lived, but didn't matter. Like that was worth it to go drive around with people who loved indie stuff the way that we loved indie stuff. And that was a real movement. Like it was a real community of people, and they showed me like this VHS tape of the Scribble battles from '97. And in that year, it was like Juice, Dose One, Eminem was in it. This guy Deuce Leader. There's like a whole group of people, and I had started battling about that year, like low key stuff around New Hampshire, because the thing was like I couldn't write to save my life. Like I had all these verses that were just trash, but like I couldn't count bars. I didn't know anything, but I could freestyle. And that was the thing for a long time. Even like I went and like did shows in different parts of the country just freestyling because
Yeah, me
I didn't have
too.
any,
I've
yeah,
done.
I didn't have any songs. Like I didn't, when people were like, yo, you do have a tape or like you got a 12-inch or whatever, I'd be like, nope. Like I just am here. So what ends up happening is that, so to make this story short, was that so there was a group, they were called Live Poets, and that was Soul and Alias and DJ Mayonnaise DJ for them. And so they got asked to perform at Scribble. And so this is Scribble 98. And so number one, I was fascinated with the battles. I saw a Dose battle and I was like, yo, this dude is like he is so next level like that. I don't even know. Eminem was like slightly different for me because like I had heard his records, and you know, like at the very, very beginning, we had a homie in Detroit, so like he had played me some Eminem stuff. So like he wasn't as like mystical to me. I was like, well, this dude's putting out records. I'd never heard anything from Dose, and I'd never heard anything from Juice before I was like up in the Mole Man and you know all that. And so watching these guys was just, I felt like they were gods, you know? And so I was like, I want to go out to Scribble, and like, I want to watch, like I want to watch these. I want to be there for when this battle happens. Well, and the Soul ended up moving to Oakland and was like so broke from his move, he didn't have enough money to fly to Scribble. So he was like, you have to go and perform in my place in Live Poets. Like, you've got verses, like figure out verses. You could figure out my lyrics. Like, this is too important. Live Poets can't cancel, but I can't be there. And you're going to go to Scribble anyways. So, like, you got to take my place. So I said, okay. And so for whatever reason, I said, okay. So when we went out there, the first night of Scribble, it was like Saturdays were the battles, Friday was the show. And that was when Live Poets were supposed to play. This other group, the Sebutones, Buck 65, 62, they played. I can't remember other people who were on that bill. But it was in this like packed little room, and people were just, it was the beginning of something, you know, it was so exciting. And so Live Poets get up, do their thing, and I rap, and like it goes really well. I had met Dose like before then, just briefly, but somehow, and this is the thing, like I can't remember the specific reason, but somehow he calls me on stage to do a freestyle because he knew I could freestyle. And so what ends up happening is like Yoni, who also he goes by Y now, who they've been incredibly successful, but like Yoni's like playing a hand drum, and suddenly like Dose and I start freestyling, and we're both named Adam, and he just like goes to this other planet, like and something clicked in me, and I was like, I'm down. Like, and I just go right with them. And we're like doing this crazy, like, it was like jazz. We were doing this crazy improvised thing. And I like left my body, you know what I'm saying? Like, and the, the room was like dead quiet. It was like this thing that was happening because Dose is from Cincinnati. But he also like, people who knew, you know what I'm saying? And like he was somebody who had like notoriety in that little world. Nobody knew who the fuck I was. You know what I mean? Like nobody knew who I was. But I would just was there. And all of a sudden it like just created this incredible moment. It was one of the dopest like performing moments of my life. And I was 19, I think, at the time. We drove from New Hampshire to, I mean, I drove to Portland first, picked those dudes up, and then we drove to Cincinnati. Like, got lost along the way, no GPS. We're just like looking at an atlas. We're all packed in this car. So that moment happens, and it just was, it was, it really was one of those times when I felt like freestyling became this thing for me where it's like, oh, this is a way for me to connect with all these other people and like really command a room. But it wasn't like, yo, put on this beat, we're gonna go like 4 bars, do this thing. Like we were just like in it, and it was wild. So that, but that specifically was like, yo, this is like the highlight of my life, you know, and I'm like 19, like it was ill. I was super excited. People were like, yo, who's this dude? But I still just sort of like went to the back, you know what I mean? I was like, all right, cool. I'm just kind of watching. Well, like I'm listening, the battles, like the prelims for the battle are about to happen. And you had to like go through this round where the judges would sort of like watch you almost like try out, and you had to like freestyle for them for like 30 seconds or something. So I'm like, yo, I want to go see this. This is like right up my alley. Like, let me go watch. And I'm standing there watching. And do you know who Kevin Beecham is?
Yep.
Right. So Kevin Beecham is like, he's the one sort of running the MC battle. And to me, he was also like a god. Like I've heard his name. I knew about his time travel Chicago show. And he calls my name, and he's just like, next ADM. And I'm like looking around like, oh shit, there's another ADM here. Fuck, that's been my name. And like all the guys with me are like pushing me forward, and they're like, yo, we entered your name into the battle. And I was like, they're like, we knew you'd never do it. So I was like, so I just like go up there and I just like freestyle for 30 seconds and they put me in the battle. And then like all these things, man, like for real, it's a lot, but like all these things just kept happening. Like I won, like I like won my first battle like so decisively. It was this crazy moment. And but the judges got our names wrong. And so they announced the person who I beat, they announced his name, and the crowd like rioted. Like they went crazy. And so until someone told them, then that dude went to the next round and battled. And like he lost that round, but it was like until someone told them that they got the names wrong. So then they had to put me back in because the crowd was going so crazy that then I had to like battle again. And then they put me in and then I ended up battling Slug and won. But it was like it was very surreal. The whole thing was very surreal.
Man, that sounds crazy.
It was crazy. I'm from Key, New Hampshire. I'm 19 years old. I was like, I don't know what the fuck is going on. You know, I was like, I'm just there. And then all of a sudden it was like, but that was the thing, man. That was the beginning. It was like there are people from Salt Lake there, people from Halifax there, people from Florida, there's people from Cali there, people from Texas, people from Boston, people from all over the place, people from Wisconsin, people from Minneapolis. So people started hitting me up like, yo, we'd love to fly you out to do this show. And like, I now need records out. No one knew who I was. But that's how I started touring. You know what I mean? Like it was just from that moment and from people seeing me. It was like a viral moment, like before anything could go viral, you know?
Yeah, man. Yeah.
Yeah. So that's one memory. That thing with those. I don't even know if that exists anywhere. Like that audio. Maybe somebody must have it somewhere.
That sounds insane. I would love to see and hear it. I mean,
Yeah.
obviously there wasn't the cell phone shit going on back in the day, you know what
No.
I'm saying?
Nobody
So
had a phone. No, I didn't even have a phone. Like I didn't even have like a flip phone. There was nothing. It was 1998. Like anybody who was recording it on a handheld, like with tape. We have some of that footage somewhere, but I don't know if we have that. Um, so there's that, and then also, so freestyling has always been very specifically to me in the moment. It's using whatever elements of your present environment, you know, like to build something off of. And that's the energy in it, that's the physical things in it. All of that it was really what freestyling was for me. And really freestyling for all my touring years, like that always was the big thing. I'd usually end the show with like an acapella freestyle or something. I've done tons of like random things with like drummers, you know, stuff like that where they're trying to like throw me off. And for a long time, I definitely realized that I was using it in some ways more like scatting, um, which was that like, I mean, like I was saying words, but it was so much about the pattern. You know, it was like just finding ways to use words to, it wasn't just about like punchlines, because that to me was the very, very much like, you know, part of that whole battle culture, which is why I left it, was I just felt like there was at the time like no progression. You know what I mean? Like it just
I
felt
feel
like
you.
every battle rapper that I knew had never made a good record. You know, like
It's the same now.
it's like yeah, that's true. I mean, that's how it felt to me, and I was like, oh, just because I can freestyle well, I'm not really. This isn't my natural thing, and it was until I figured out how to write, and also I just realized this is not like this part of me. Like it was just fighting without fighting. You know what I mean? Like it like it satisfied that urge, that adrenaline thing to like I was saying that, you know, listening to Onyx or listening to Mob Deep or listening to MOP or like all that stuff back in the day of like I would get so hyped listening to KRS-One was like, and this was a way for that energy to like go somewhere. So freestyling to me has always been that, but at the same time, I have to listen to like the old heads too, you know, who all the OGs who like did believe like that free verse was like a verse you'd never heard before, you know. But there's also like, you know, I've been obsessed with this dude. This is a bit of a detour, but like I've been obsessed with this dude FlowDan. Do you know who FlowDan is?
No,
He's
not
part of
familiar.
like he's part of the early like grime scene. So he's like I guess he's based in London. I heard of him. There's a song called Badadan that with these guys Chase and Status, who are these like,
Oh, I know Chasing Status or
yeah,
like
British
yeah,
like jungle stuff, and like because that
yeah.
was that was the thing too. Like way back in the day, I also had, you know, like friends who were like drum and bass DJs or whatever, and so I would like show up and they'd have these little like mini raves or something, and I would like freestyle over drum and bass stuff because I could do that, you know. And I was always really interested in that part of the culture. But Flodan, he's got this like crazy like deep voice, but man, so dope, so dope. And he actually just won a Grammy for, he just did an album, or he was on a bunch of stuff with Skrillex. But he's just like, he's so ill, and like I'll look for all of his stuff, and it's like him going in and doing these like BBC like radio shows, and it's like Bars of Steels, like this Australian show, whatever, like, and people come and they just like drop a verse, like they're freestyling. I'll hear him do like the same verse, you know, in like all of these places, but it's like his freestyle verse. You know what I'm saying? It's like not his song. It's like the verses he has specifically for like those types of shows, you know? So like to me, that's like a version of freestyling, I suppose, or like that version of free verse. But I'm a purist when it comes to actual freestyling.
Yeah, me too, man.
Yeah, I mean, and as somebody that's not as inundated with that, I think why not just call them two separate things? You just did
I
there. Free
and
verse,
Yeah, yeah,
and
yeah,
I used to do that too. I used to call those free verses
yeah,
as
yeah.
yeah.
opposed to freestyling. That's what I used to
What's
do.
wrong with that? I'm curious.
Nothing.
I actually got a question for Denku.
Yeah.
Denku, did you also start freestyling before you wrote?
Yeah. Yep.
So I'm curious because like I then am the only one in this call who went the other direction. So
Mm,
like for me, I've been in the process of like trying to sharpen the freestyle sword, sitting, you know, like throwing beats on and doing stuff. It's very, very out of the element. It's getting a lot more natural now, but like I started from a poetry background
mm,
into getting into sitting down and writing beats. So it was like counting bars was one of the first things I learned to do. And then sitting down and being able to write and do all these timing things, that was kind of first. And
mm.
then now I'm trying to do it the other way. So I'm curious from y'all's perspective, what do you think is a harder road to go? Do you think it's harder to go from freestyle to learning to write or learning to write to freestyle?
Mm.
I mean, I think, I mean, I don't think this is probably the most interesting answer, but I think it's impossible to say as far as like as it being just sort of in general, like or this sort of blanket statement that like one's easier than the other. I think it's how the individual mind works, you know. I mean, I came to know that about myself because my writing style is 100% from my freestyling. Like it almost always do I hear a verse in my head, I just start writing. It's like I basically am just freestyling. It's different. It's like one comes out in the way that it's supposed to, where it's very much a live thing. Or if I'm just in the car and a beat comes on, I just start freestyling. It's different. But I can sort of when I'm pointing my brain towards the paper, um, well, I mean, I'm not gonna front when I point it towards my notes and my phone. I don't think I've written like physically written a rhyme in 10 years. Like it's all I've typed it because I can go way faster when I type. Um,
Mm.
but that's like where it comes out of my mind. That's always where I've created from. Freestyling is in that section of that sort of impromptu stream of consciousness is where all of my music comes from. So I think I learned to write from there because that's how my mind works. You know, so I can't say the same would be the same for Denku, you know, or you. Like
Right.
it's completely different, I think, for each individual person. There's no one way I think that's easier. That's my
Is your
perspective.
writing process the same, Denku? Is it are you kind of like freestyling to the page when you write?
Yeah, it's definitely what it is. That's why I can have a full song done in like 30 to an hour. Like it won't
Right.
even.
Yeah. I'm the
I
same.
I mean, I can do that. I mean, obviously, if I want to grip onto some type of deeper concept or something, I might spend more time. But it's like I've told Pestilence, like real quick. So rest in peace, Chino XL, because this is a Chino story actually. Rest in peace,
Mm.
Chino XL,
Rest in
who just
peace.
passed today. We heard that.
Awful.
Very sad. One of my biggest influences. But we've had conversations about this, and I remember a conversation actually when I was out getting ready to battle at Scribble Jam. Actually, I think it was. Oh man, was it '03? Might have been. No, it wasn't. It wasn't '03. It was it was the year I got um damn '06 maybe. I think it was '06. The year Reef was there. So it was '06, and I had a conversation with Chino on the phone before I had went to the battle, and we randomly started getting off topic of the battle, and we started talking about bars. And I remember talking to him about how, like you were saying, my train of thought is kind of on the freestyle thing. So like things just come out and then they go to the page or whatever, and I never actually go back and tweak anything. I
Mm.
I think it's and he was like, well, why don't you do that? You could tweak a bar to become an even better bar. And I was like, wow, I don't know, man. Like it's just when it's done for me. Like that's just how my mind is going. Like when it's done, it's done. And I'm not that crazy perfectionist because I feel like if I was a crazy perfectionist, none of my shit would ever come out. So that's why I probably have so much music
Right.
because I'm not a crazy perfectionist. And when I'm done with something, it's done. I don't go back and tweak it or reevaluate what it is. It's just that's what the song is. That's what was made in the moment, and now that's what's getting put out. That's
Mm.
pretty much where I am with it. But
That's interesting.
as far as the idea of trying to dive into the lost, pretty much a lost art of off top freestyling, when you started writing, I honestly can't even imagine what that's like.
It's really weird, man.
Personally,
It's
I
really,
can't even imagine.
because it's like trying to create a different way of thinking for me is really what it comes down to. Because for me, the writing process was so derived from like poetry and ultimately perfectionism because it was like I focused on the flow first. I focused on putting words together. And kind of like what you were saying before with like the scatting thing and like
Mm.
wanting to place the words in a way that sound appealing. And you're still using words, but it's like I like the way that they sound as much as I want to say something interesting with the words. I
Right.
wanted a good fusion of both of those things, which a lot of the times, sometimes I'll sit down like last night it happened, which I'm shocked because I worked a double. I was really tired. And Space Case just sent me a beat and was like, hey, let me know if you're digging this one. I just was experimenting with some sounds and I was smoking a cigarette outside and I just immediately heard some bars in my head. I wrote them down and then I just kept going with it and I was done in 10 minutes. You know, I had a verse and was like, bro, let's use this for the next R&R project. And I sent it to him and he was like, damn, man, like that was, so you fuck with it. It's like, yeah, man, like it was a dope beat, but it's definitely a different headspace. Like when I'm trying to intentionally freestyle, like I find myself, if I'm thinking too much, I'm not freestyling, you know, like
Yeah.
I'm not getting anywhere. I'm turning the tires in mud. Um, so the way that I've kind of gotten out of that and the way that I've practiced that I think has aided me the best actually comes from like I game with my friend Mars a lot. He's also an MC and he's somebody that he freestyles well. He writes well. He's dope. And him and I have a relationship where it's like we're in a crew. We give each other shit all the time. So it just comes from like roasting first and foremost. So it's like we'll just start roasting each other in like freestyles. Just start dropping like freestyle roast to each other over the phone. And that seems to come the most naturally and kind of get me into that state. And then once you're there, once you got those floodgates open, it feels easier to keep it going. But if I'm just sitting in a car playing a beat, I don't get myself into that right headspace first. I'm like, this is fucking trash. Like I can't get myself out of the fucking gate. Like what the fuck?
Yeah.
So it is it's a weird process because it's like a lot of those things that you were saying when you were talking about freestyling and telling the story about like the Scribble Jam experience and being up on stage with Dose One. It's like that is definitely, I think there's something to that because it's like when I talked to like Mars, the same dude, he had an experience not like on stage, but he was at a big hip hop event and they were all probably 50 MCs in a house afterwards, just kind of kicking it. And they were freestyling. And he said that like he just had one of those times where he was like, I left my body, I went and everybody went crazy, and it was like an
Yeah.
out of body experience. And it's like, I feel like I haven't had that experience yet, but I've touched the flame close enough to understand like
Mm.
what that is. Like it's like, damn, okay. And I've seen Denku do it a couple times. You know, it's
Mm.
like Denku, it seems like, man, it's like he always has like a dope freestyle regardless. But it's like there's times where it always seems to come out when Denku gets angry. When people fuck with Denku or something stupid is going on at the show, he digs deeper into the bag, and the angry Denku just starts like creating on the spot the craziest shit. Like we just did a show earlier this month, and like I mentioned the name of like this guy who's just a thorn in everyone's side all the time, and he put together some of the funniest punchlines I've ever heard off top using that subject matter. He
That's
did
dope.
couple shows earlier where it's like, people trying to interrupt him while he's going, and it's like then they're getting ripped apart, and it's
Right.
like, you start to learn. It's like, and I'll tell those people too, like when they come up, I'm like, like he has a mic in his hand, you don't like,
Don't interrupt a dope freestyler. You just shouldn't do it. That has a
like
mic in
just
their
like,
hand. Why would you even
bro,
do
it's
that?
like
Yeah,
it's
I
like
never
threatening
understood
somebody
that.
else that has a gun with your bare fist. It's like, dude, you're
Right.
shot, man. Like you're done.
That's
So it's
I've
interesting.
had a lot of those. I've had a lot of those experiences. Most of them, I've rarely ever had that happen with a sober person. Like it's
Yeah.
usually someone who's got drunk muscles, and man, I've had some wild moments like that where people just like, yo, give me the mic, or like, let me get on it. So and always I was like, yo, I can't imagine what it's like to be you. Like you are such a fucking sucker. Like I just like can't even
Right.
imagine what that is like. Like, and but man, and it's funny, like over the years, it was like always the same dude in a different city. And you're just like, this motherfucker is here. It's like just like always the same dude who just wanted to like, I don't know. I always thought like, wow, this for like 3 seconds, we always used to joke that, I'm all about spreading the nice guy gospel. I'm just like, I'm trying to just be cool with everybody. I'm trying, my default energy is peace, or like I work hard for it to be. So if someone breaks that line, like it takes a lot usually, like, but that is that like tour when you get on stage, you're like, this is my world, you know what I'm saying? And like you step over that line, like you're not safe anymore, and that's your
Right.
fault. You know what I mean? Like that's like I can't there are so many times that I was just like, yo, I'm gonna just give you get one warning. Like just one, like, and if you're not interested in like chilling out, I can't help what happens to you. You know what I mean? Like are you sure you want to do this? Fuck yeah. Nah. Give me the business bullshit. Give me that mic. It's like, okay. And then just blah, rip the throat out. And then it's like then they're just embarrassed. You know what I mean? And you're like, I tried to tell you this is what I do for a living. Like, get the fuck out of here. You don't go up to like Michael Jordan and you're like, yo, one-on-one, son. like it just, to
It's an
me,
archetype, man. There's people that are challenge anyone in a professional in their own craft and really believe that
yeah.
they have a chance. It's like a heckler at a comedy show,
No,
bro.
it's the same thing. And I used to be like mad fascinated with that. I would be so fascinated I'd always want to talk to them after the show to be like, yo, can you just like explain to me like fuck were you thinking? You know what I mean? Like, but just like what? Just tell me what was going on in your mind. Like it was a horrible. Like, do you always make horrible decisions, or was this like your first one? Is this like the first time you've been humiliated publicly? Like, tell me more about yourself. Like, are you doing this shit like in like the coffee shop? You know what I mean? Are you doing this shit at like a funeral? Like someone's giving a eulogy, and you're like, nah, let me get the mic. Nah.
Yeah,
I knew this motherfucker better. Yo, it's always the same dude. No matter where you were, no matter what part of the country, they didn't say their ahs. Hey, yo, it was always the same shit.
my dad's a vampire. Yeah.
Yeah, yo, let me get that mic. They always said the same thing. Son, it's just like that blew my mind. I was like, wow, you're everywhere. But I mean, but I was always like at the end, like, hey, I appreciate you, man. Like you made my show better tonight. Like
Right.
you were the thing, Only one time did I ever have to like get physical with people. Actually, that's not true. There was a number of times, but only one time did some dude like charge the stage at me, and we were in the middle of the set, and this guy just like charged, and he like tried to climb up on the stage. He was drunk but had that wild eye. I was in the middle of my verse, never stopped, ran up and just like field goal kicked his ass like straight off the set, like full run, bam. And he was like, and he was like climbing on this thing, and he was holding on to the monitor, and when I just booted him, and he like held on to it, was like, it just fell backwards with the monitor, and it like fell on top of him, and we never stopped. I'm just like, did
Holy fucking
it
shit.
it was crazy, and I'm like in the middle of my verse, and like it's about to go to the hook, and this like DJ breakdown, and I was like, ba 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 ba, never fear, security, get him the fuck out of here, and everyone's like, and I was like, is that dude dead? I don't know, but he shouldn't have rushed the stage. But like there's only been a couple of those moments, but it's just
Bro.
people are nuts, man. Like
Is
they're
I
nuts.
wish. I wish.
is there video footage of that? That might make you go like TikTok famous or something.
I don't know. It's like I don't know. Part of me was like, oh, I'm glad no one filmed it so I don't get arrested. But then the other part of me is like, damn, that would have made really dope footage. There was one time that live streaming was brand new, and like brand new. We were playing a show in Charleston, South Carolina, and I remember, yeah, this is so wild. And you know, do you know Alaska and Wind and
Yep.
Breeze, like the Hangar
Mhm.
guys? So we were on a tour with Hangar 18, and we're just like pretty tired. I mean, that same like tired. We'd gone back on the East Coast, gone all throughout the country. That was one of those long tours. And I remember calling my family, calling, my fiance at the time, like DQ called his family. We're all like, you could watch the show from a computer. Everybody had a computer at this point. It was like 2007, I think. It was 2007. So like it had progressed enough. We all, everybody had, fairly good internet, I guess, at the time. We were like, yo, if you click on this website, you could watch. So like all of our families are watching, and we were doing this, we did this whole bit with impeach the president. Like at the time we were using the like impeach the president drums, and it would like kick into this, like it was a break, because I had this line in this glue song that says impeach the president, and then everything stops, and then the impeach the president drums come in, and we do this whole little like back and forth, impeach the president, whatever. And this guy in the crowd like did not like that, and like the song ends, stops for a minute, and this guy's just like yelling at me from the crowd, and he said something like, you know liberal blah blah blah, like a liberal piece of shit, or like, and he said something to me, and he goes, oh, are you you some liberal piece of shit, like, you know, gay liberal piece of shit or something like that. Some red. And then I was like, well, I am. I was like, but well, are you like a dumb racist redneck? And he just like threw his beer at me, right? So it's like slow motion, and I see him like throw the beer. So I duck and then just like boom, like drop the mic. And I just flew off the stage at him. But our whole families are watching, and all they can see, there was footage of this, is like me duck and then just disappear from the stage. And it's just like, you know, it's like, and then I just like dragged him outside and like threw him out. But it was like, you know, our families are calling us like, what the fuck is going, like, what is happening?
Damn.
Man, that was ill. But it was like the whole crowd was on my side, and we're like chanting for me to like drag him out of the venue. And I did. I just like knocked him down, dragged him out of the venue, and threw his ass onto the street, and then came back in and did the set. It's like wild days, man. It's like wild.
Damn.
I'll never
Damn.
forget that though. Yeah, weird. But anyways,
So
yeah.
okay. So I don't want to keep you super, super long, but I want
No,
you
I get
to
it.
explain to me, so what is Echo Finch?
So Echo Finch started as, so it's a billion different things, basically, just like everything else that I do. Echo Finch is really like the foundation. I feel like the source of like where I'm plugged into creatively right now. So Echo Finch is a company. It's a production team. Um, it's a record label. It's the name Echo Finch is this massive art collective. And so that's what it is. As a company, I started Echo Finch, and as a company, like we produce podcasts, do music for podcasts, do music for commercials, do licensing, and it's also a label. So like stuff that we're releasing is really getting pushed over to like the licensing side and in that world. Um, but Echo Finch would like produce a podcast for you or score something for you. We just did a movie, scored it. And then on the production side of things, like as an Echo Finch is also like represents itself as an artist. So there's like a bit of a mysterious element to it as well. There's like some people who remain nameless, like who are involved and also like ad production stuff. And so like there's not really like Echo Finch is a they, like of people, but I'm really the only one who's sort of like front facing. But I add to the production of what it is, because I started making beats about 4 years ago. So I've been doing a lot of producing and scoring and things like that. So that's a whole other life where like I taught myself that. And so that's like, yeah. So I have like production partners that I do stuff with, but I'm really the only one who has like a face attached to it.
Yeah.
So that's really what Echo Finch is. Like to me, like I said, it's more of an entity. So it's all of those things. So Echo Finch like also puts out records, like our own stuff. So like we have an instrumental album called 1998. That's just like all beats. And then Echo Finch is really like the driving force between like this new EP that I just put out, 2 Minute Miracles. It's like all Echo Finch beats, and then I'm rapping on that stuff. But I consider it different. When I rap now, it's under Adam and the Flood. And just to like also answer a question, you know, so this also isn't like 4 hours for people or breaks Facebook. Um, I was working with this manager for like a quick second, and she had said to me, because we had talked about like the whole ADM thing, and she was like, is it ADM, is it Adeem, what's it look like you should have something easier. And that's when I had started working with the band, and I was like, all right, this thing that I'm doing, I do want to change up. So she was like, well, you should just call yourself like as a singer songwriter, you should just change it to what your full name is. And my name is Adam Arnone. And so I was like, I don't have I mean, Arnone to me has a lot of baggage to it as well. Like as far as like a last name, and I'm actually a really private person, and I was like, I don't want like my like last name necessarily be the thing. Like that feels too like exposed. And she was like, well, just try to like dig around. What are some things that represent you? I was looking into the history of my last name. And so the Arnone actually comes from the river Arno. I'm fully Italian. And the river Arno, how it like runs through Italy, um, it's one of the most unpredictable rivers in the world. So the thing about it is that it goes from flood to dry. It's very rarely is ever like in the middle, but it goes from flood to dry. And it's funny because that was something that I felt like really represented my creative process. Is like sometimes I just walk away and I'm not doing anything, and then other times I'll hear a whole entire massive project and it all comes into my head, and that's how I write. Like what you just said, it's either all or nothing. If I'm like I don't really feel like writing, it's hard for me sometimes to get into it. That's changed over the years, but so there was this idea of being flooded, and also I've as I've come to know my mind a lot more in these years, like I've understood that my whole creative process is about being flooded. Like that's how I freestyle. You know what I mean? It's like flooded with this energy, flooded with information. Um, when I was young, I always had panic attacks. Like that was all. Anxiety has been a whole thing for me my whole life, and like understanding how that energy was about being flooded. So that's when I was like, it's kind of like been me and the flood, like for my whole life. And that's when it happened. I was like, what about Adam and the flood? And my wife was just like, that's dope. Like, I like that. And then it also kind of was the same as like changing it to ADEEM. I was like, well, this sounds like a band. Like Adam and the Flood sounds like a band. So really, the flood is me and whoever I'm with, or maybe it's just me, but it's this new shift in like how I was basically approaching things from like and how my rapping was basically interacting in singing, because I started singing too. I've always sang, but like never in front of anybody, but I've only gotten comfortable in the last couple years. But I come from a whole family of singers, so it was like Adam and the Flood was me actually being my truest self. And it was the flood was just a way of saying my last name. Do you know what
Mm.
I'm saying? So
Oh,
that's where it came from. Because people will call the Arno the flooded river. So
Yeah,
that's where it came from.
that's what's
So
up.
so that's what I go by when I rap now, is like by Adam and the Flood. So all this stuff that I'm putting out now is like Echo Finch, because Echo Finch produced it, and I like that idea of it being like a producer driven album. So it's like I
Yeah.
got all these beats, and then Adam and the Flood is featured on them. And that 2 minute miracles thing that I put out was after I had done the record I sent you, is called Chasing Gods, and that's what comes out this fall. That's been done for probably about 6 months.
Mm.
Um, D Styles, who is my favorite DJ,
Cold.
I
Crazy
he's
cold.
like crazy. So I got him. So he's on every track, and so it's a collaboration with D Styles too. And then, are you familiar with Future Wave, the producer Future Wave? You know who that
It
is?
sounds familiar.
He's
Sounds
from
familiar.
Toronto. Man, he's done a bunch of records lately. He's one of my favorite producers too, and he mixed it and mastered it, which was really dope. He's done a lot of stuff with this dude Danielson. You familiar with
Oh yeah,
Danielson?
yeah. Yep.
Danielson's dope. Boldy James. He Rome Streets, like I think he did a record
Yeah,
with.
yeah, yeah, yeah.
His stuff is so grimy, man. Like I really everybody who's listening, like you have to go check out Future Wave. He's the dopest. So anyway, so it was this whole collaboration, but the whole thing is just me rapping. Most of it, there's no hooks. It's like just these verses, and it was a throwback to that, like just that feeling of listening to mixtapes, just verses and verses. And so there's a lot of like vocal samples and stuff that came off of, that stuff that I like kind of I'm responsible for those vocal samples. Like I was digging around looking for interviews.
Mm.
There's like an interview with like Rakim, Evil D. There's like some dope like um uh So who I'm trying to think of who else is on there. Mr. Magic is talking on there, like, and he's talking about like future hip hop, and it's like 1987. You know what I'm saying? Like, um, Run is on there, like DMC is on there. Just there's some old stuff that I just found of these like live clips and interviews, and then like whatever through those Echo Finch's way, and like the way they put it together is really dope. But the whole point is that I'd created this thing and was trying to like work towards people hearing me rap again, because people haven't really heard me rap in a long time. And so I was like, well, I know this album isn't coming out for a while, so we should do just like an EP or something to just like bridge it, something super easy. And so that's when I ended up making 2 Minute Miracles. It was like, because I was like getting
Really?
these beat, I was
You can
getting
sit
these, I was
you can sit in here if you want.
Oh, I was getting these beats, and I was like, the exercise is create 1 2 minute verse and like be done with it all in the span of, like you said, like it was like 1 hour from writing to recording. It was basically just freestyles. It's like, just I heard the beat, did it all in one take, just did the thing. And then that's when we got the idea of a 12-minute song where each verse is 2 minutes, so the beat changes 6 times. So it's really like this whole thing, and that's supposed to be the bridge that connects, the stuff I've been doing in the past to this new shit, which is just me, just rapping. That's it.
It's so dope though.
Thank you, man.
Like, and like the flow of it is cold, like you said, with the
Mm,
samples. Like, obviously I got to preview it, and
mm.
I mean, yeah, I mean, D Styles does the finishing touch on everything. Like the
Yeah,
cuts
man.
just bring it all together nice. And
I missed it. I hadn't had a record with cuts in a really long time,
and
and I was
and
like, it's
it's
foundational.
it's dope. It's so dope. It
Thank you,
definitely
man.
brings me to that um the golden era vibe.
Mm,
Like with all the beats.
mm,
I can tell you what stands out to me
mm,
is Follow, because
mm.
I love the griminess, because I'm a
Yeah,
grimy,
man.
like I love
No
grimy
doubt. Yeah,
shit.
me
So
too.
like that joint
I
to
love
me
that.
is like, woof.
That's dope, man. I love that you, yeah, I love that one. There was, you know, when we had the conversation about like what this would be, it was very much like super minimal. You know what I'm saying? Like I wanted super minimal. Synths, bass, and drums. Like there's no samples on there. It's like all just straight up, like just raw. And that was really interesting too. It's like knowing the type of stuff that I wanted, and like things to sort of reject and be like, I don't think this fits. I don't really think this fits. But like all those beats were, when I first heard them, was like, this is it. You know what I'm saying? Like this is
Mhm.
exactly what I wanted it to feel like. And I wanted it to have that sort of like futuristic but like grimy sound. All those drums are from, they're like places that specifically we wanted like the sound to be like. This dude, which is funny because we just had this conversation about like how people pronounce names wrong, but I think his name is Tamuz. It's Tamuz. um
Mm.
like drum packs, like drummers, Drumetrics, like huge shout out to them. Dude, Shroom, um this other dude, AJ Hall, Jeremy Page, like, who they put out these, like, I support those people who put out drums that are strictly recorded on tape, mega grimy. So like looked for like drummers and looked for, things like that specifically sort of fed that need. And that's what I wanted. I was like, I want this sort of blown out, those just like, and it's really just a dedication to beat miners. Like beat miners are like they're like my favorite, and a very specific beat miners era. I mean, I roll with them forever, but that window of Black Moon,
Mm.
of The Shining. The Shining is like my favorite. Smith and Wesson, The Shining is like my favorite produced hip hop record, maybe ever.
That's what's up.
Yeah, man, I love that griminess too. So, anyways,
That's so dope, man. So
yeah,
I mean, there y'all go, people. Y'all heard it. Chasing Gods coming out in the fall. Make sure you keep tuned for that.
Yep.
Super dope.
Thank you.
I'm not even gonna lie. I know we're on the podcast, but man, I just want to say, always had a lot of respect for you as a MC, as an artist, as a freestyle dude. Definitely. Me and Pestilence are working on a project. I would love to send you something to see if you vibe with it, to maybe drop something on it. I just think it would be fresh. You know what I'm saying? I don't know, I don't know,
I'm
Pest,
always down.
You
I'm
cool
always
with
down.
maybe doing it?
Absolutely.
I'm always down, man. Always.
Yeah, so maybe we'll definitely do that. Pestilence, you got something before we do the outros? You got something you wanna?
Nah, man, this has been a fucking dope.
It's been
very
dope.
informative.
It's been
Very
dope.
informative convo.
We went
man.
all different directions. We talked a lot of different things, man.
I appreciate y'all, man. Thank you. I was telling you before, it's like, it's not like a million people are banging down my door, but I don't know, a lot of times, like, I just haven't done a lot of interviews, mainly because I'm just sort of in my own little world, but at the same time, I have been feeling more in the last, like, year that I understand more of what D Styles and I were just talking about this, like, of trying to, like, do some shows, or like, I got a lot of ideas of how I would interact more, like, with a supportive world again. You know what I'm saying? Like, and having that's why I asked, like, anybody, go follow Echo Finch. Like, you can find us on Instagram, or, just go to echofinch.com. You can learn a lot about, like, what we're doing, but also just follow us on, like, there's an Echo Finch page on Spotify or anywhere, Apple Music, all those places. Follow us, because there's a lot of really dope stuff that's coming out, and a lot of dope people we're associated with. Especially, I just want to shout out this dude Rain. Have you ever heard of Rain before? I don't know. I mean, he is responsible for a lot of really dope music. He is nobody does what he does. And his beats are so dope. We put out some stuff as an Echo Finch. He's one of, like, the foundations of Echo Finch as well. On all social stuff, he goes by today's forecast, like today's, and then the number 4, and then CAST, because you can't find.
I'm gonna check him out.
You can't find rain anywhere. You know what I mean? Like, it's such a generic word, but, like, that's who he is. Like, that he's always been Rain, but all his socials, everything under today's forecast. And he also put out a record called Hiding from Tomorrow with this dude Latrell James. Super dope. Super, super dope. But yeah, I mean, everybody should check his stuff out.
I actually just started following him right now.
Boom.
But
yeah,
man. Well, I mean, if you are in the area, man, me and Pestilence are actually going to be on a Denku and the Pest tour. We are playing Rap Night in Manchester. I don't know how far away that is from you.
Oh man, when are you doing that?
October 13th.
Damn.
We will be there.
45 minutes from me. That's not far at all, man. I'll come through. Yeah. I'll definitely come through.
Yeah, man. October 13th, we're going to be on tour. That'll be, I think that's damn near the midpoint. We're doing 21 shows, 21 dates.
Yeah,
it's nowhere near the 200, but No,
man. I don't know. That's that's enough. 21 is enough, man. It might as well be 200. That's still a lot. That's still, man. I hope New Hampshire gives you love. I'll definitely be spreading the word.
Yeah, I'll definitely remind you when it gets closer, man. And I'm gonna send you a joint from us, see if you vibe with it. If not, no big deal. But I figure I'll toss it out there because
will you come back publicly on the podcast and be like, just an update, we sent Adam the beat, he is not fucking with it at all. He thinks it is shit.
Yeah, I'll tell the guy right behind me. I'll be like,
just an update.
Adam, the beat sucks, bro.
Just an update. Adam is no longer fucking with us at all. Just an update. He
called the venue and got our show canceled.
That's right. Yes, he has asked for man. I'm gonna be. I already know. I'll be feeling it. Yeah.
Cool, man. Well, again, everybody, this has been The CyphaDen Chat podcast in association with the Denku podcast. I'm your host, Tayamu Denku. That's the homie Pestilence. Tonight we had special guest, Adeem, a.k.a. Adam in the Flood, a.k.a. We're not going to do them all, but you already know what it is. Make sure you go follow him on all the socials and all that good stuff. Shout those socials out one more time.
Yeah, so Adam and the Flood, you can find me there, or you can find me at Echo Finch. On Instagram, it's Echo Finch NH. But you can just go to echofinch.com and it has the link. That's ECHOFINCH. Echo Finch.
There it is, right there, man. And yeah, this is presented by CyphaDen Music, where we inspire even those higher. And remember to never stop chasing your dreams, because you will never know what you are fully capable of.
Oh, so inspirational.
There it is, man. There it is. And that's how we're going to end this. Peace, love, blessings. Thank you for being with us tonight.
Yeah,
Adam,
thank you for having me.
Dope. And
all right, man.
What the fuck was that? Did you just see what happened? What was that? There's like
balloons, bro.
There's like balloons. This is crazy.
The peace balloons. That's how we do it over here.
Yeah, man. Appreciate you, man. And we'll be in touch, man. And when this drops, obviously I'll get some clips and all that. But you have a good rest of your night, man.
Peace, man. Thank you so much.
Yep. Peace.
Peace.